The sky above Viridia was a soft green, filled with floating lights and silver birds that sang gently. The palace of King Thalos stood high on a crystal hill, its tall spires shining in the morning sun. Inside, everything was quiet but not peaceful. Servants walked quickly. The cooks whispered. The guards stood stiff. And in the grand dining hall, Princess Lyra sat still, her silver eyes staring at the untouched food in front of her. The dishes on the table were the finest in the galaxy, cooked with rare plants, sweet moon fruits, and glowing nectar. The chefs had spent hours preparing the royal meal. But Lyra, the only daughter of the alien king, had not taken a single bite. "Your Highness, the food will go cold," her maid said softly. Lyra gave a weak smile. "It's beautiful, but I'm not hungry." Truth was, she had been hungry for weeks, no months. A deep, strange hunger that none of the royal meals could satisfy. The royal healers called it a taste disorder. The advisors blamed stress. But no one had a real answer. Her body was healthy, but her soul felt empty. King Thalos had grown. Worried, his daughter was pale. She no longer laughed. Her once bright spirit was dim. He ordered every food expert in Viridia to bring new recipes. None worked. So, the king tried something different. A group of humans had recently arrived on Viridia as part of a peace exchange. They were allowed to bring samples of their planet's culture, including art, music, and food. The humans set up a small camp near the palace, and among them was a young man named Nate. He wasn't a soldier or a scholar. He was a cook. Nate had grown up on Earth, working in a small food truck with his grandmother. When he got the chance to join the space exchange program, he packed spices, oils, and recipes passed down through generations. He didn't come to impress kings. He just wanted to share the warmth of Earth food. On the second day of the cultural fair, Nate set up his small kitchen under a glowing dome. Curious aliens walked by, sniffing the air. He grilled bread, boiled rice, and stirred pots of spicy stew. Most aliens found the smells strange. A few brave ones took tiny bites and walked away quickly, not used to the strong flavors, but word traveled fast. "Human food is weird," one alien said, as another added, "but it makes you feel something." Lyra heard the talk while walking in the garden with her tutor. She turned her head toward the fair. Something in her chest moved. Interest, curiosity, maybe even hope. That night, she couldn't sleep. She stared at the ceiling, thinking of human food, spicy, warm, different. The next morning, dressed in a simple robe and cloak, Lyra slipped past her guards and went to the fair alone. No one recognized her. She walked quietly through the stalls, finally stopping in front of Nate's setup. He was humming while slicing vegetables. He looked up and smiled at her. "Hey there," he said kindly. "First time here?" She nodded. "Want to try something simple?" he offered, holding up a small plate of golden brown bread with melted cheese. "What is it?" she asked softly. "Grilled cheese sandwich," he said. "Comfort food back home. Here, take a bite." She hesitated. Then slowly, she took the plate and bit into the warm bread. Her eyes widened. The taste exploded in her mouth. Salty, soft, warm, rich. Her body froze for a moment, then she closed her eyes and swallowed. For the first time in weeks, her hunger pulled forward like a flame catching wind. Is there more?" she whispered. Nate laughed. "Of course." He handed her a bowl of noodles with spicy sauce, followed by sweet rice cakes with cinnamon. She ate slowly, but didn't stop. Nate watched her with care, not knowing who she really was, just happy to see someone enjoying his food. After a while, Lyra wiped her mouth and sat back. Her heart felt full. It's not just her stomach something. Deeper. "You're good at this," she said. "Thank you," Nate said, a little shy. "Earth food is all about heart. Food's not just fuel, it's memories, love, healing." Lyra nodded. "I believe you." She stood and left quietly. Nate didn't even know her name, but she returned the next day, and the next soon it became a secret routine. Every morning, she left the palace in disguise. Nate would have something new. Ready a stew, fried vegetables, a sweet drink. Lyra learned the names: tacos, dumplings, stew, pancakes. They talked about flavors, about Earth, about life. Lyra began smiling again. Her steps grew lighter. The cooks in the palace were confused. She now ate breakfast but refused royal meals. The king noticed and grew curious. Who was healing his daughter? Meanwhile, the guards began whispering about the human cook. They saw Lyra leaving early and returning happy. Some grew suspicious. Some grew jealous. Nate had no idea. He just thought he'd made a new friend. A quiet girl with curious eyes and a soft smile. But things would not stay simple for long, because soon the king would learn the truth. And Nate would discover who the girl really was. Nate woke early every morning, just before the second sun rose. The air on Viridia was cool and soft at dawn, and he liked the peace before the fair became busy. He set up his small kitchen, arranged the ingredients, and cleaned the cooking area. With care, he didn't know why he was doing extra work lately, but deep down, he was hoping the quiet girl with silver eyes would come again, and she always did. She never gave her name. Nate called her Star Eyes in his head, though he never said it out loud. She watched him cook with interest and asked questions about every spice, every method. She didn't act like other aliens. She smiled at silly jokes and sometimes laughed when Nate told stories about his grandma back on Earth. But mostly, she ate. And when she ate, she looked happy. Nate felt proud every time she finished a plate. Feeding people made him feel useful. Especially here, on a strange planet where humans were still new and not fully trusted. This morning, Nate had made something special. Earth-style pancakes, warm and soft, with honey and slices of fruit on top. When the girl arrived, wrapped in her simple blue cloak, her eyes lit up at the smell. "This is new," she said. "Sitting at the small table? Thought you might like something sweet." Nate replied with a grin. "This is what I used to make for birthdays." She took a bite. Her eyes widened. She chewed slowly, then closed her eyes. This tastes like joy," she whispered. Nate chuckled. "That's the goal." She took another bite, slower this time, like she didn't want the moment to end. Then suddenly, the peace was broken. 3 tall royal guards marched toward the booth, their eyes sharp. Nate stood up straight, confused. "You are the human cook?" one of them asked firmly. Yeah," Nate replied. "Is there a problem?" Before the guard could answer, the girl stood up. She pulled back her hood. Nate blinked in shock. Her face, now clear in the morning light, matched the paintings he'd seen on palace walls. "You're the princess?" said in disbelief Lyra. Nodded, her voice calm. "Yes. My name is Lyra, daughter of King Thalos." Nate's heart dropped. He had been feeding the alien king's daughter without knowing it tanned. Now royal guards were staring at him, like he'd broken a law. "You need to come with us," the lead guard said. "Wait," Lyra said quickly. "He did nothing wrong. I went to him. I ate his food. He never asked who I was. He just shared what he had." The guard looked unsure. The king must hear of this. Lyra looked at Nate. "Come with me, please. Don't be afraid." Nate nodded slowly. "Okay." Palace halls were huge, made of shining stone and flowing light. Nate felt small walking beside Lyra, his cooking apron still on. They passed nobles and advisors who looked at him with surprise and confusion. Some whispered, some frowned. Inside the great throne room, King Thalos sat tall in his crystal chair. His long cloak flowed like water, and his eyes were sharp and thoughtful. "My daughter," he said, his voice deep. "You brought a human into the palace?" "Father, he's not just a human," Lyra said firmly. "He's the one who cured my hunger." The room fell silent. "His food," she continued, "made me feel alive again. Not just full, but whole. Nothing from our kitchens helped, but his cooking did." The king looked at Nate. "What is your name, Earthman?" "Nate," he said, bowing slightly. "I'm just a cook. I didn't know she was royalty, I swear. I just saw someone who was hungry." King Thalos stood and walked down the steps slowly. You shared your food without fear, without demand. And it helped my daughter. Nate nodded. Food is like that. It brings people together. The king was silent for a long moment. Then he spoke again. You will not be punished. But some on the council will ask questions. I hope you are ready to answer them. Yes, sir, Nate said quietly. Lyra stepped forward. Father, let him stay in the palace. Let him cook. Not just for me, but for others too. The king looked at his daughter. She stood tall and proud, stronger than she had been in weeks. Very well, he said. Nate of Earth, you are granted temporary guest status inside the palace. Cook as you wish. Let us see if your food truly has the power she believes. Nate was given a small kitchen near the royal gardens. It wasn't big, but it had everything he needed. Lyra visited often, helping him chop and mix, even though she had never cooked before. She learned quickly and laughed when the flour got on her hands. The first dish they prepared for the royal court was simple: rice with herbs, roasted vegetables, and a light broth with soft bread. It was warm and filling. Nothing fancy, but when the council tasted it, something happened. A quiet fell over the room. Then one councilwoman wiped a tear from her eye. This reminds me of my mother's cooking, she whispered, before the war. Others nodded, their faces softening. King Thalos tasted the food last. He set down his spoon slowly and looked at Nate. You may have started something greater than you know, he said. Nate just smiled. It's all in the seasoning. But not everyone was pleased. Some nobles whispered that earth food was too plain. Others feared humans were gaining too much influence. A few even said the cook was using his meals to charm the princess. And in the shadows of the palace, not all eyes were friendly. But Nate didn't know that yet. For now, he was just happy to see Lyra smile. And for the first time since arriving on Viridia, he felt like he belonged. Days passed quietly inside the royal palace of Viridia. The once cold and quiet halls now carried the warm smells of earth food, baked bread, seasoned rice, and soft stews. Servants who once hurried past Nate's kitchen now paused to smile, hoping for a small taste. And every day, Princess Lyra visited without fail. Sometimes, she came early to help prepare the food. Other times, she brought alien fruits or herbs from the royal gardens, asking how they could be mixed with earth spices. Nate always welcomed her with a smile. They laughed often, especially when Lyra accidentally spilled flour or made soup too salty. She had never cooked before meeting Nate, but now cooking had become her favorite part of the day. One morning, as they made simple flatbread together, Nate looked at her with a thoughtful expression. You ever wonder, he asked, why your hunger disappeared with earth food? Lyra nodded slowly. Yes, maybe it wasn't just hunger of the body. Maybe my spirit was tired too, Nate smiled. My grandma used to say, a full belly means nothing if your heart stays empty. Then you fed both, Lyra whispered, almost too soft to hear. But before Nate could respond, loud footsteps echoed down the corridor. It's a palace advisors entered the kitchen with serious looks. The king requests your presence, one said. Both of you. Nate wiped his hands on his apron and looked at Lyra. She nodded once, then followed the guards. Inside the throne room, King Thalos stood beside a long table. A row of guests sat waiting. They were council members, each wearing elegant robes with different symbols. They'd come from other regions of Viridia to meet the human cook for themselves. You are Nate, correct? Asked a councilman with sharp eyes. Yes, sir, Nate answered politely. We've heard stories of your cooking. They say it brings peace, joy, even memories. Is this true? I don't know about magic, Nate said, but I cook from the heart, and it seems to help. Another councilwoman leaned forward. We will judge that ourselves. King Thalos turned to Nate. Prepare a meal for the council. Nate was surprised but didn't hesitate. Yes, your majesty. Within an hour, he brought out a tray of dishy as earth and Viridian ingredients mixed together in a respectful way. Roasted root vegetables with garlic sauce, soft dumplings filled with star fruit and cheese, and a dessert made from local nectar and cinnamon sugar. The council members ate slowly at first, but soon their expressions changed. One smiled, another sighed deeply, eyes closed. One councilman even laughed softly, saying it reminded him of the first festival he attended as a child. King Thalos waited, then asked, "Do you still doubt him?" The sharp-eyed councilman shook his head. "No, the food. It brings emotion, connection, maybe even healing." But not everyone agreed. "This is strange," another advisor said. "What if he's using food to charm our people, even the princess?" Whispers spread through the room. Nate stepped forward. "I would never use food to control anyone, only cook to bring people together." Lyra stood beside him. He'd never asked for favors. "I went to him because I was suffering. Through his kindness, I found hope again." The king raised his hand and silence returned. "Enough," he said firmly. "The human stays, and he will continue cooking." After that, Nate's small kitchen was moved to a larger hall, closer to the palace center. More guests arrived every day, nobles, guards, workers, and even children. Everyone wanted to try Earth-style cooking. Nate taught the palace chefs how to make simple dishes: bean stew, roasted corn, spiced tea. Lyra helped teach others, too, sharing her growing knowledge of Earth food. Soon, meals became events. People from different regions sat together, talking and sharing. The kitchen was no longer just a place to eat, became a space for peace. But in the shadows of the palace, not all hearts were happy. A noble named Orion, cousin to the king and a strict traditionalist, watched all this with quiet anger. He believed alien cultures should remain pure. To him, Earth food was a danger, and he believed the human was growing too close to the princess. "This cannot continue," Orion said to a few trusted nobles. "We must protect our traditions." The royal bloodline. He began gathering support in secret. While Nate cooked with joy, someone else was cooking up trouble. Late one evening, Nate sat by the kitchen window, watching the twin moons rise. Lyra sat beside him, sipping warm tea. "This place," Nate said, "feels like home now." "You feel like family," Lyra replied with a smile. They sat in silence for a while, peaceful, calm. Then, a soft voice called from behind the curtain. "Cook, Nate, you are needed." It was a palace messenger. "Surprise banquet is happening tomorrow. King Thalos wants you to prepare the final dish." Nate stood up. "I'll be ready." But when the messenger left, Lyra looked troubled. "A surprise banquet?" she asked. "The king didn't tell me." Nate frowned. "It's a council thing, something more," she said quietly. Neither of them knew that Orion had planned the banquet himself and that the next day, to test everything Nate had built. The next day arrived with bright skies and a strange energy in the air. The palace was decorated with banners and glowing lights. Servants hurried to prepare the great hall. Noble guests in fancy robes filled the space, whispering and waiting. A large table was placed at the center, ready for the grand feast. Nate stood in his kitchen, mixing ingredients with focus. He had chosen to make a dish from his grandmother's recipe, a warm earth stew filled with soft vegetables, beans, spices, and small pieces of roasted bread on top. It was simple, but it had meaning. It was the kind of food that reminded people of home, no matter where they were. Princess Lyra entered quietly, watching him stir the pot. "You're calm," she said, though her voice sounded worried. "A little nervous," Nate admitted, "but I'll do my best." "This banquet wasn't planned by my father," she said. "It was arranged by Lord Orion. I don't trust his reasons." "What do you think he wants?" Nate asked. "Maybe to make you fail, or maybe something worse." Nate nodded, and we'll face it together. As the sun reached its peak, the guests were seated. King Thalos arrived last, walking slowly to his place at the head of the table.
Wow.
He looked around with a serious face. He knew this banquet had not been his idea, and he didn't like being left out. Lord Orion stood and raised a glass. "Today," he said, "we honor the growing bond between worlds. But we must also remember who we are. Let us enjoy a meal from the human cook who has gained much attention." His words were smooth, but his eyes were cold. Nate entered with a calm heart. placed bowls of earth stew before every guest. Warm smell filled the hall. People looked surprised. It was not fancy or glowing like alien food, but it smelled comforting. The guests began to eat. At first there was silence, then a few quiet hums of approval. One noble leaned over and whispered, "It tastes like peace." Even Orion took a bite, said nothing, but his expression tightened. King Thalos tasted his bowl and paused. His eyes softened, but Orion stood suddenly. "May I speak?" he asked loudly. The room turned quiet again. "We thank the human," he said, "but let us not forget, he is still an outsider. His food may be good, but is it safe for the future of our culture?" Some nobles nodded. Others stayed quiet. "Has spent much time with our princess," Orion continued. "Too much, and many wonder what is his true purpose here." Nate stood frozen. He had never wanted power or attention. He had only cooked to help. Lyra stood up beside him. His purpose was simple. "He fed me when nothing else could. He brought me back to life." Orion raised a hand. "You defend him?" "Too quickly, princess. Some say you are no longer thinking clearly." King Thalos' voice broke through. "Enough." Everyone turned to him. "You speak of fear, Orion, but I see no danger in a man who offers kindness through food. Nate has not taken from us, he has given." "With respect, your majesty," Orion said, "if we let this continue, what will happen next? Human influence may grow. What if the people forget our traditions?" Nate stepped forward. His voice was calm. "I never wanted to replace your food. I only wanted to share mine. Maybe there's room for both." A young servant suddenly stood from the side of the hall. She held up a small bowl of the stew. "My brother was sick," she said. "Couldn't eat for weeks. But when he smelled this stew, he took a bite. Now he eats every day." Another voice rose. "A guard this time. I used to eat alone. But now, thanks to your meals, I sit with others and talk. You made this palace feel warm again." The room filled with soft voices, others sharing how Nate's cooking had changed their days, not through power but through care. Orion's plan had failed. King Thalos stood. "Nate, we're more than welcome here. Not just as a cook, but as a bridge between our people." The guests clapped, some softly, some with full hands. Nate felt his heart swell. He'd never imagined this when he first stepped off the Earth shuttle. Lyra looked at him, eyes bright. "You did it." "We did it," Nate said with a quiet smile. Later that evening, after the banquet ended and the halls became quiet, Orion stood alone in a shadowed corridor. His jaw was tight, his eyes narrow. Someone had placed a human at the center of their royal palace, and now even the king supported it. But Orion was not done. If the human won't leave, he whispered to himself, then maybe we must make him fall. That night, as Nate washed dishes with Lyra beside him, he looked around the warm kitchen. "Never thought soup could change lives," he said with a chuckle. Lyra smiled. "It wasn't just the soup, it was you."
Eight.
Stood quietly for a moment. Nate turned to her. "Thank you for believing in me." Lyra touched his hand gently. "Thank you for feeding more than just my stomach." But as the stars filled the night sky above the palace, a new danger began to grow in the dark corners of Viridia, quiet, patient, and waiting for the right moment. Nate had brought peace to a palace, but peace is always tested, and something was coming. The days after the banquet were filled with joy across the palace. The halls were no longer cold and silent. Instead, laughter echoed near the kitchens, and the scent of new dishes drifted through the air. Nate's food had reached not just the nobles but also the guards, the servants, and even the children of the court. Nate was still surprised by how much everything had changed. He remembered how nervous he'd felt when he first served food to Princess Lyra. Now, she stood beside him like a true friend, sometimes even like something more. They worked side by side, creating new dishes that mixed earth flavors with Viridian ingredients. The people loved it, but while peace filled the kitchen, danger moved in the shadows. Lord Orion hadn't given up. He met in secret with a few nobles who still feared change. They sat in a dark room beneath the palace, hidden from the king's eyes. The people are falling under the human spell, Orion said, his voice sharp. Even the king listens to him now. What can we do? One noble asked. His food is popular, and the princess trusts him. Orion leaned forward. Then we must make the people turn against him, not through words but through fear. Pulled out a small vial filled with dark blue liquid. This is not poison, he said. It causes stomach pain and weakness. Just enough to frighten. We will place it in one of the humans' dishes at the next event. And then, when guests fall sick, Orion smiled, they will blame the cook. The king will have no choice but to remove him. Oh. No one spoke for a moment. Then slowly, they nodded. Meanwhile, Nate was preparing for a special event. A peace dinner was planned for guests from other planets. It was a big moment, and Nate wanted to do something new. Lyra helped him come up with the idea. Let's make a stew that tells a story, she said. Story of two worlds coming together. So they made a dish using root vegetables from Viridia, mixed with herbs and grains from Earth. It was slow-cooked, rich in flavor and comforting. Lyra named it Unity Stew. As they cooked, they didn't know someone had entered the kitchen when no one was looking. A quiet shadow. A drop of blue liquid was added to one of the stew pots. It was just enough. To cause trouble, the peace dinner began under the palace dome, where stars could be seen through the glass ceiling. Leaders from 5 different planets sat at the long table. King Thalos welcomed them, standing beside Princess Lyra and Nate. Today, the king said, we share more than words. We share a meal that reminds us that peace can begin with something as simple as food. Nate and the palace chefs served the Unity Stew to each guest. Smiles spread as they tasted it. Delicious, said a diplomat from the silver moons of Callan. Earth flavors are strange, added a green-skinned leader from the planet Dorn, but strangely comforting. Nate stood back and watched proudly. But then, after several minutes, one of the Viridian guests coughed, then another. Soon, a third guest groaned and clutched his stomach. Whispers began. Eyes turned toward the bowls. Something's wrong, a noble cried. A healer rushed in and began examining the sick guests. Nate's heart dropped. What's happening? He asked, stepping forward. They're reacting to something in the food, the healer said. Lord Orion stood and pointed at Nate. You see? He shouted. This is what happens when we let outsiders into our palace. He has poisoned the meal. No, Nate said, stunned. Why would never I made that stew myself? But the room was full of worry and fear now. Some guests stood up, backing away from their bowls. King Thalos raised his hand. Silence. Everyone stopped. We do not jump to blame, he said. We will test the food. Within minutes, the royal scientist arrived with his tools, tested all the ingredients. Then he carefully studied the stew pots. Finally, stood and faced the king. Your Majesty, he said, one pot of stew was tampered with. A strange liquid was added. It is not deadly, but it caused the illness. And the other pots? The king asked. Safe, the scientist said. Nate looked at the king. I don't know how this happened. I swear to you. Lord Orion stepped forward. How convenient that only one pot was affected. Perhaps it was just a mistake, or perhaps it was a warning from him. Lyra walked forward. Her voice was strong. I was in the kitchen the whole time. Nate never left the room. He never touched anything alone. Someone else did this. You would defend him, even now? Orion asked. Yes, she said, because I trust him with my life. The room fell quiet again. King Thalos stepped down from his seat and looked Nate in the eyes. I believe you, he said, but the people are frightened. We must be careful. He turned to the guards, search the palace, question everyone. Find out who tampered with the food. The guards left immediately. The event ended early. Sick guests were taken to rest. And Nate returned to his kitchen, heart heavy. Someone tried to destroy everything we've built, he said to Lyra. We'll find the truth, she said. We won't let fear win. That night, a young servant who worked in the kitchen came forward. He had seen something. a shadow in the kitchen, a hand dropping something into the pot. And the robot had the mark of Orion's house. The king now had proof, but he didn't act right away. He waited, knowing Orion would try again. And when he did, the king would be ready. The palace was quiet under the soft light of the twin moons. The royal gardens shimmered with dew, and the air smelled of blooming flowers. Inside, King Thalos sat alone in his chamber, thinking deeply. The events of the past days weighed heavily. On his mind, Princess Lyra entered softly, her silver eyes bright but calm. She carried a small tray with 2 cups of warm tea, made with herbs from the gardens. "Father," she said gently, "the time to act is now." King Thalos looked up. "Yes, daughter. Orion's actions cannot be ignored any longer." Lyra sat beside him. "Nate has done nothing but good. He healed me when no one else could. The palace feels alive again." "I believe that too," the king said. "And that is why this must end. Orion threatens not only our peace, but the future of Viridia." The next morning, the palace was busy with preparations. Guards moved quickly, whispers filled the halls. Orion was called to the throne room. He entered with a proud step. Unaware of the trap waiting for him, King Thalos stood, his voice strong. "Lord Orion, you have betrayed the trust of this palace." Orion's eyes narrowed. "I seek only to protect our culture." "Your protection became poison," the king said, holding out a piece of evidence, a robe stained with the blue liquid found in the stew. Orion's face changed. "This is false. A trick." "Guards," the king said, "seize him." Orion was taken by surprise but didn't resist. As he was led away, he shouted, "This is not over. The human cook is an enemy." After Orion's capture, peace slowly returned to the palace. The guests from other worlds continued to visit, enjoying Nate's meals and the new friendships growing between cultures. Princess Lyra stood beside Nate in the kitchen, smiling as they prepared. "Feast together." "We did it," she said softly. "We did," Nate agreed. "Thanks to you," they served the feast in the great hall. The people ate happily, sharing stories and laughter. King Thalos watched from his throne, proud of his daughter and the human who had changed their world. One evening, as the stars shone brightly, Nate and Lyra walked through the palace gardens. "You have changed so much," Nate said. "Not just here, but in me." Lyra smiled. "And you changed me." They stopped by a small fountain, its waters glowing softly. "Do you think the future is ready for us?" she asked. "I think we already are," Nate said. "And maybe one day our worlds will be one." Lyra looked at him with hope. "Then we will face it together." The story of the alien princess and the human cook spread across the galaxy, a tale of hunger, hope, and the power of simple kindness. It was not the food alone that healed, but the courage to share, the trust to accept, and the strength to stand together. And in the heart of Viridia, beneath the glowing moons, a new chapter began.